Romanticism. That's difficult to define. It changed the way we think of the world today and how we view things. It started around 1770 and ended in the mid-1800s. Romanticism encouraged people to break the structural rules, and it made for a much simpler time in music and art and literature.
Let's take a look at some of the things that happened before, during, and after the Romantic era. Of course, it is difficult to know when exactly a movement starts and ends, nor how everything fits together. So let's draw the curtain back. The American Revolution, French Revolution, Mexico becomes independent. We see expansion and new inventions. This was also the time of the Industrial Revolution. How does this connect to Romanticism? Let's look at some of the themes of Romanticism. Seeking the faraway, searching new places and exploring the world. An awe for nature, enjoying nature's grand design. Simplicity and honoring the common person. Emotional depths. Breaking the rules. Gaining forbidden knowledge. Creating the fantastic. Many new artists embraced these themes, particularly an awe for nature. One artist, John Constable, traveled across the English countryside creating masterpieces of British landscape. Rather than creating the perfectly proportioned person or the perfectly captured landscape, artists focused more on the emotional depth of what they were creating. Of course, unlike our demonstration, they would use real nature as an example rather than a painting. Of course, there is more to Romanticism than just art.
To get a better understanding of Romanticism, let's look at someone that helped start this writing movement, William Wordsworth. Wordsworth was said to be the father of Romanticism. He believed that the free expression of the feelings of artists was the main part that contributed to the start of Romanticism. William was a poet that felt that the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings should be the creation of poetry. In 1998, Wordsworth and the other poet, Samuel Coleridge, created lyrical ballads, which was a huge impact on the Romantic movement. Lyrical ballads was poetry that was written in normal, everyday language in order for the average person to be able to understand and feel the emotions behind each poem. Wordsworth and Coleridge wanted these poems to represent the adaptation of the poetic pleasure throughout the conversations between the middle class and the lower class of society. Another one of Wordsworth's famous works was the Prospectus to the Recluse. This poem wasn't finished, but the meaning behind the poem, The Excursion, is the same context as the prospectus. There are lines that Wordsworth wrote in both that explain the relation between the human mind and nature, which is kind of an idea of Romanticism.
My voice proclaims how exquisitely the individual mind, and the progressive powers perhaps no less of the whole species, to the external world is fitted, and how exquisitely, too, themed this but little heard of among men, the external world is fitted to the mind.
The two lines, how exquisitely the individual mind to the external world is fitted, and how exquisitely too theme this but little heard of among men, the external world is fitted to the mind, explains that the human mind is adapted to nature, and nature is adapted to the way one man's mind works.
We can also learn more about Romanticism by looking at Gothic romances, a new genre emerging at this time. Gothic romances were often mysteries set against dark backgrounds and medieval ruins. They often involved the supernatural and were laced with horror. Some other Gothic romance novels include The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, the first Gothic novel, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, Dracula, and the works of Edgar Allan Poe. The characters included in Gothic fiction include a virginal maiden, a young, virtuous woman who, when her virtues are challenged, often faints and cries. She usually starts with a mysterious past and is later revealed to belong to a noble family. Other characters include a foolish woman, a hero, a villain, a stupid servant, clowns, bandits, and a clergy. The setting is often a character in itself, as the building holds secrets of its own. Let's look closer into the Gothic hero. A Gothic hero is someone who is rejected by society and is often hermit-like or alienated. They are obsessed with a lost love, and their quest often starts as fulfilling something for themselves, but later fulfills a greater cause. Some examples of a modern-day romantic hero include Ponyboy from The Outsiders and Harry Potter. Let's compare the Gothic hero to the previously known epic hero. An epic hero embodies the ideas of the culture and is often somehow connected to a god. Some examples include Achilles and Perseus and Beowulf. While there are few differences, there is also one major similarity. Both heroes' quests are able to fulfill a great need for themselves and society. Mary Shelley's character Frankenstein is the perfect example of a Gothic hero. Let's look closer into Mary Shelley and how exactly she thought of the idea for her great novel.
Mary Shelley had writing in her blood. Her mother wrote one of the first feminist books ever published, and her father, William Godwin, was a leading reformer, author, and politician-philosopher. She even married a poet, Percy Shelley, and they were good friends with Lord Byron. After the sudden death of her husband, Shelley was able to support herself by writing. Today she is known for writing Frankenstein. This actually came as a challenge while she and her husband were visiting Lord Byron.
Okay. You guys got any ideas about a ghost story to tell?
I've got an idea about a skull-headed lady that got punished for peeping through a keyhole.
Interesting. What about you, Mary?
Mary Shelley had not yet thought of any ideas till later, when Lord Byron and her husband were talking. She records this. Many and long were the conversations between Lord Byron and Shelley, to which I was a devout but nearly silent listener. During one of these, various philosophical doctrines were discussed, and among others the nature of the principle of life and whether there was any probability of its ever being discovered and communicated. They talked of the experiments of Dr. Darwin. I speak not of what the doctor really did or said that he did, but, as more to my purpose, of what was then spoken of having been done by him, who preserved a piece of vermicelli in a glass, till by some extraordinary means it began to move with voluntary motion. Not thus, after all, would life be given. Perhaps a corpse would be reanimated. Galvanism had given token of such things. Perhaps the component parts of a creature might be manufactured, brought together, and endued with vital warmth. Mary Shelley used this idea to create Frankenstein. At first a short story, but later, after some encouragement from Lord Byron, became a great novel.
Lord Byron was another English poet that had a big role in the Romantic movement. One of his famous poems was written in 1814 called She Walks in Beauty. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace, which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear, their dwelling place. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days and goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent.
Byron created a new type of hero. Much like his own personality, the Byronic hero has an ironic attitude and a hidden sorrow. The Byronic hero can be compared to a modern celebrity or rock star.
After all of Lord Byron's poetry, he decided to travel. He traveled all over Europe until he decided to fight for the Greeks from the Turkish rule. They considered him to be a national hero after that, until, unfortunately, he broke down in a fever, got very ill, and died a year later.
Let's also look at some of the music composed in the Romantic era, specifically Beethoven. Music in the Romantic era took a major turn, from Bach in the Baroque to Beethoven starting in the Romantic era. The expression of new harmonies was created, and there was less structure in the rhythm and form of the piece. Let's listen to the opening of Beethoven's Symphony No. 9. I would say that's an amazing piece of work created by someone who's deaf. Let's also listen to a piece by Richard Wagner, a German composer best known for his cycle of 4 operas, of which I cannot pronounce. Other composers in the Romantic era include Michael William Balfe, Felix Mendelssohn, Jean-Baptiste Arban, Johann Strauss II, and in the late Romantic era include Antonin Dvořák and John Philip Sousa. I guess you could say that Romanticism, in its own way, is stretching your imagination. Many traits of Romanticism live on today. Do we not still awe in nature and adventure through national or state parks? We seek the far away, space travel. We create the fantastic and enjoy our individuality. Music still holds elements that date back to the Romantic era, and many poets today still use free verse. This was a time to break the rules and use your imagination, and it is no different today. What then can we say about Romanticism? Now that we have more pieces of the puzzle, we can see a greater picture. Romanticism was an era of reform, a period of individualism, and a time to shed new light on old ideas. Poets and artists and writers alike would break the previous structure. Without Romanticism, we wouldn't have the creative ideas we have today. We wouldn't have horror films or romance novels, which means no chick flicks.
Romanticism changed people from being concerned about their own identities to becoming who they want to be. Not a peasant, noble, or merchant. Just themselves. As for William Wordsworth and John Constable, they both were concerned, or started off formed into somebody that society wanted them to be, until they could develop and understand their own identity or way of life. Although these artists had to break some rules to discover their identities and artwork, it helped start the Romanticism movement throughout the 18th century, from Germany and England throughout most of Europe, until it finally reached the French.